In February of 2024, my £30 million business, Videscape Ltd, was stolen from me by two directors. Within a year, they collapsed it into administration and £1 million worth of debt. They then sold all the assets out from underneath the shareholders in a pre-pack without telling the shareholders. My name is Thomas Oswald, and this is chapter 11 of my story. So where we are now, the administrators have brought in some independent investigators, and they are doing a SIP2 investigation, which is an in-depth investigation into how the directors have behaved up to 3 years before the collapse, which is, as far as I'm concerned, brilliant. We passed over all the evidence to the investigators and the administrators. What is interesting to note is we had to do a director's statement. Part of that director's statement linked to publicly available resources which had been on the website. Interestingly enough to note, those have now all been deleted, so the new management is clearly going through, given that they're related to the old management, and trying to remove as much evidence as possible for the responsibility of the failure. As I had mentioned before, we'd been working with a set of administrators to try and see if we could overturn the existing administrators' decisions. Unfortunately, that doesn't look like we can do that. The process they went through is legally defensible, so the company is not recoverable. However, whilst the process they went through is legally defensible, the process they went through was dictated by what they were told by the directors, which again didn't involve me, an active director of the company. Whilst the company is not recoverable, there is no reason why we can't build a new one. And given that we know what we're doing with this business, and the people who currently own the business don't know what they're doing, is that it actually wouldn't take us long to build a far superior product. What we need to do it is money. And this is actually the next step we're going to carry on. So in the process of stealing the company and removing me, the directors misled a series of auditors, misled the company's lawyers, lied to the shareholders, got the police to arrest me illegally, and of course they themselves committed substantial fraud. So we have multiple parties there that can be sued for compensation because their actions directly led to the collapse of a £30 million business. And this is where ChatGPT has been the most incredible tool. So the last week, I've basically been feeding all the information into it. It's 1.7 gigabytes so far. I know 2,000 pages of evidence and stuff. GPT has condensed that right down into 2 pages. It has then identified a series of law firms across the country that will work on conditional fee arrangements. We've already got one that's accepted to sue the police. So the police now have a lawsuit against them in progress because they didn't act fast enough, given that when they arrested me, on the day they arrested me, they had the evidence from the raid of our house to prove that the allegations were false. It took them a year and a half, which gave the directors plenty of chance to destroy the business. So ChatGPT has identified 3 more lawyers to go after the auditors, like Goodhead, because as part of their mandate or their licensing requirements, they should have spoken to me. They should have looked at what made up the board, and they should have gone, why are we only getting information from 2 of the 3 directors? They didn't. Therefore, they are responsible for the collapse of the business. The lawyers, again, why were they only taking information from 2/3 of the business, not the 3rd one? And finally, the accountant, who we know has been working with the chief director behind this for a substantial period of time, a company called Silkbow Accounting, again, fraudulently fabricated the accounts by putting hundreds of thousands of pounds on my director's loan account simply on this director telling her to do so. And under accountancy regulations, she should have been, at the very least, sending me an email saying, should this be on your director's account? Is it a business expense? And asking me to explain why it should or should not be on my director's loan account, which of course never happened, which is why I ended up with a £300,000 or £400,000 director's loan account behind my back, which is of course largely what they used to remove me from the business. So in conclusion, the SIP2 investigation, well, the director investigation could take up to 2 years before we see any consequences. The SIP2 investigation will be reported to the administrators, that will then be reported to the insolvency board, and that'll be further investigations. So That's going to take some time. So in the background, we're going to be acting against the chief proponents of this, getting some cash, rebuilding the business and obliterating the business that's been stolen, which will be poetic justice. And this is a private message to the directors who stole my business and watch my videos and are trying to do everything they can to ensure I'm not involved in this investigation. I built that business over 10 years on my own with no investors to many millions of pounds worth of revenue. There's no statute of limitations on breach of fiduciary duties by fraud, and the compensation for this will more than cover the damages you have done to my business and the shareholders. Chasing you down is going to be nothing compared to building that business, and I'm going to do it. You're going to be bankrupted, you're going to spend time in jail, and you will never be company directors again.